Just about time for love to begin. Just about trouble they'll stumble in. From Nailstone streets to dreams out loud, they're just about lost and just about found.
It's loves and tears, life turns about. In our story, just about.
Just about 7 hours later. There they are, told you they'd come. Yeah, you might have done, but I don't have to believe it. Mrs. Robertson over the road says that aliens abducted her last week, but I don't have to believe it. My uncle says Wolves are the best team in the country, but I don't have to believe it. In fact, I don't. Chris realised he was rambling and furthermore realised why. He'd had the day at home supposedly putting the finishing touches to one of his end-of-year projects. In reality, he had spent most of the time staring at the almost completed painting of his dad in his allotment, project titled Contentment, in another world. The problem was he couldn't get his mind off Karen. They'd only spoke for an hour or so, and that was with interruptions from Paul and Sue, but she had filled his mind today, and now he was nervous. He couldn't identify why exactly. She was just a girl, plenty of fish in the sea. And it wasn't as if he'd never had a girlfriend before, but reluctant as he was to admit it even to himself, there was something about her. At least his first fear hadn't been realised. She had come, but what if they'd only come to say they weren't interested? Nah, surely not. He and Paul didn't know where the girls lived. In fact, he'd realised today he didn't even know Karen's last name. It would have been simplicity itself had the girls not wanted to see them again to just not turn up, and they wouldn't have been able to do anything about it. Paul was blissfully unaware of his friend's internal meanderings. He had never doubted that Sue and Karen would turn up, and for that matter, on time. Okay, girls, how's life? He was away. Paul the confident, Paul the easygoing, Paul the smoothie, Paul the one who was likely to make himself and everyone around him look a right prat if he wasn't watched carefully. They paired off into the couples of last night, Chris hesitantly giving Karen a kiss on the cheek, which was about as far as he got the night before, while Paul planted a long lingering kiss firmly on Sue's lips. She didn't appear to struggle, and Chris wondered if he'd been a bit backward in coming forward in his less enthusiastic greeting of his partner. Still, Karen had grabbed his hand, and they walked together through the park in the warm evening sun. It felt nice, that small hand in his. Made him feel protective and even strong. Grow up, Chris. It's not like she's the first girl whose hand you've held. You'd have changed her and turned into some sort of gibbering wreck. Karen felt strangely content, holding this stranger's hand, knowing very little about him, yet content. It was as if something had changed when they had met this evening, even strangely, that she had become a different person. The fears of lunchtime gone, though she knew in the back of her mind that at some time or other in the week, if it lasted that long, she'd have to raise some of her doubts about her behaviour of last night, just to clear it up in her own mind. For now, however, she was content to walk with her new man and enjoy this summer's evening. They walked almost in silence at first, with just the occasional comment about things they spotted in the park. Didn't seem to matter. Paul and Sue were chatting away loudly and stopping to snog every few seconds. Consequently, they were lagging further and further behind Chris and Karen. Karen wondered what was coming. Despite the sense that it was okay just to walk hand in hand, saying very little, she had felt Chris's hand tense a little in the last few seconds, and she wondered what was coming. I got you a little present, he finally almost spluttered out. As he did so, he put his hand in his jacket and produced a block of chocolate and gave it to Karen. It was clear that he had put his body in such a way as to shield it from the sight of Paul and Sue, but Karen pretended not to notice. She had already worked out Paul's attitude to life. It was also clear as he handed it to her that a block of chocolate on a hot day like today, especially stored in his inside jacket pocket, was perhaps the not most suitable present. I think it might have melted a bit. That didn't seem to worry Karen. She turned round, faced him, stretched up to put her arms around him, and planted a long lingering kiss on his lips. Thank you. What was that for? It's only a melted block of chocolate. Be careful, Chris. She might think you don't like it. Not that I'm complaining, of course. Nor me, that was very thoughtful. I bet your mate hasn't brought Sue any chocolate. What? No, I wouldn't think so. He might have brought himself one. This made Karen laugh. He hadn't seen her do this before, but when she let go, her face beamed and she had a twinkle in her eye that seemed like a mixture of ecstasy and joy of life. Spontaneously he kissed her again, this time without the reserve, putting his arms around her waist and lifting her slightly off the ground as he did so. "Be careful, you're breaking my chocolate," she said, as she closed in for more. "Put her down, you don't know where she's been," the unmistakable voice of Paul shouting as he and Sue drew near to them. Chris turned towards them and was aware of Karen behind him rummaging her handbag. He guessed she was putting the chocolate out of sight of sarcastic eyes. "Mind your own business," he replied, realising as he said it that wasn't the most original and witty retort he could have made. "We're going to head over to McDonald's, get a shake. You want to come?" There was something in the way Paul phrased this question that Chris knew from years of experience meant he wanted a negative response. That suited Chris. Usually at this stage in the game, he was more than happy to stay as a foursome and use Paul as some sort of comfort blanket. He was, after all, very good at filling in the gaps. However, this time he was more than happy to be alone with Karen and be cut loose with her. "No, I don't think so." He suddenly remembered that it wasn't his decision alone, and maybe he hadn't proved himself enough to Karen yet, and she still needed others around her, just in case. He was aware from some of the stories his sister had told him that the world of dating could be a minefield, particularly for girls with all the pervs that seem to be about these days. "Sorry, Karen, what do you want to do?" "It's too nice a night to be stuck inside. Let's just carry on walking. We can get an ice cream or something later." Good, that's what he wanted to hear. This beautiful girl with her shiny hair, bright smile and beautiful legs, sexy to speak, but still true, had captivated him, and he wanted her all to himself. "You go on, see you soon." With a cheery goodbye, Paul and Sue turned and walked back the way they had just come, towards the town centre. Chris and Karen walked and talked for a long time, sometimes stopping to sit on a bench, sometimes standing to look at things that caught their eye. A squirrel running over the grass looking for food, a pair of magpies squabbling loudly at each other, a young family playing on the swings, all the time chatting and kissing. If anyone had asked Karen what they had talked about, she would have been hard to press to answer with any clarity. The evening drew on and the midsummer sun finally began to fall below the distant trees, stretching the shadows longer and longer until they suddenly realised that it was starting to get dark. "What time do you have to be home?" "About 10:30. What about you?" "Mum expects me in about then, but I don't bother." "Sorry?" "It's a long story and one that's too boring to go into tonight. Let's just say that Mum and I don't really get on. It doesn't matter what I do, it's always wrong, so I just do my own thing. I'm going to get nagged at whatever I do, so I might as well be nagged for something I've done as something I haven't." Karen went quiet. This was something of a shock. Given all the things she had lost, she found it hard that he was someone she was becoming quite fond of, deliberately defying his mother. She said nothing. To say anything may lead on to questions about her own mother, opening up areas of her life that she was not yet willing to allow Chris into. Thankfully, there had been moments of contented quiet as they walked on several occasions that evening, and Chris appeared to interpret Karen's silence as another one of those moments. "Can I walk you home?" "I suppose so." Karen hadn't given much thought to how she was going to get back. "Don't get too enthusiastic about it." "No, I don't mean that I don't know where you live. You don't know where I live. It might be a heck of a detour for you." "Well, I know you live in Nailstone, probably near where we left you both last night. And I know I live in Nailstone, and I know Nailstone isn't that big, so I figured you can't be very far away from me." "Quite the Sherlock Holmes, aren't you? Play your cards right and you could be Watson." "What if I wanted to be Moriarty?" Chris was suddenly out of his depth. His knowledge of Arthur Conan Doyle's sleuth was limited to what he had heard people say, and he hadn't got a clue who Moriarty was. "Well, you can't be," he said, a little lamely, and hoped his ignorance hadn't been too obvious. "So, am I to walk you home, or are you ashamed?" "Ashamed? Ashamed of what?" "Ashamed of your house, maybe. Perhaps you live in a big 10-bedded mansion with servants at your beck and call and ensuite bathrooms in every bedroom. Perhaps you think I'd feel totally inferior if I saw the splendour to which you had become accustomed." "No chance there, old son. Definitely barking up the wrong tree." "Well, perhaps you live in a right dump with mice crawling over the floor, a week's worth of washing in the sink, and social services knocking on your door every 5 minutes. Maybe you think I wouldn't love you if I saw the disgusting pit you lived in." They both momentarily stopped in their tracks. "Love? Love? Of all the words to use, I had to go and say love. She's going to think I'm really pushy now or just plain stupid." They both knew that this was a sticky spot, though neither acknowledged it verbally, and Karen was the first to recover. "Try again, matey. I've nothing to be ashamed of about my house." "Well," Chris was glad to move on as quickly as possible and recognised that Karen had thrown him a lifeline. "Perhaps you're ashamed of me." You're frightened if your parents saw me, they'd ban you from seeing me again and lock you in your room every day until you were an old maid. Another awkward moment for Karen, though Chris was unaware of it. Why do people assume that everyone has a cosy family with two parents at home? She quickly recovered something she was getting used to. If you think you're getting near enough to my house tonight to be seen by my family, you have another thought coming, young man. You may escort me to the end of my street and no further. This last sentence was said in a voice that was supposed to embody morality-laden Victorian speak. What say we walk? It won't take much more than half an hour to where we hadn't met last night. We've got time and we can see if we can find that ice cream I promised you on the way. Fine by me, but I'd rather have a bag of chips this time of night than an ice cream, even if you could find somewhere selling them. One more thing, we go Dutch. I don't want you to think I'm the sort of girl that sponges off men. Fine by me, you can buy mine as well if you want. I ain't proud. Don't push it, Buster. With this awkwardness felt briefly in the last few minutes lifted, Karen put her arm in his and they walked off in the direction of Nailstone. The chips had been good. Karen knew it, a shop that Chris, though having passed it many times, had never used. They chomped and chatted like people who had known each other for years, rather than 24 hours. Karen had insisted on sharing some of the now hardened chocolate with Chris. This is my street, Karen said, as they approached one end of Truro Crescent. Will you be okay doing the last bit on your own? Chris, he liked hearing her use his name. I've walked up this road hundreds of times, okay? Okay. Another awkward silence. We can see each other again, can't we? Only if it'd been some more chocolate. It's a deal. When? This was it. This was the crunch point. He would love to see her again tomorrow, but didn't want to seem too pushy or eager. He'd like to think that he could play cool and feign indifference. Paul had always said that you should keep girls on their toes and not rush after them, but that seemed unlikely after tonight. I think I could find a window in my diary tomorrow night if that suits. Great, just a little too enthusiastically. But she didn't seem to notice. 7:30 here? Okay. She reached up, kissed him on the lips in a way he was quite getting to like, and was gone with a quick good night as she went. Chris watched her go with mixed emotions. Sad that such a nice night had ended, and proud that he had found a girl like Karen, beautiful, fun, open, and with a figure that he knew would cause other blokes to envy him. Good night, he shouted after her. Good night, from somewhere in the dark, distant dark.
It's laughs and tears, life turns about. In our story, just about.